Antoinette shirt, part 2. Go. Go! Yeah. It's a shirt with bust darts. It's got a big ruffle collar, short puffy sleeves that end with cuffs. But you don't have to make the shirt exactly as I did because the pattern comes with 2 other variants of sleeves and colors, so you can just mix and match the way you like it. If you want to make it, you will need some cotton fabric, ideally poplin, but you can also take some cheap cotton, just as I did. You'll need a bit of interfacing, woven and thin for the collar and the bottom plackets, and also bias tape, 7mm to 1cm wide is okay. And finally, 6 buttons. 6 buttons, Isa. Now move your ass over here and let's get started. Let me show you first the pieces of the pattern cut. Here is the back, that is the front with my dots drawn. We've got the sleeves, then come the cuffs with interfacing, which I haven't stuck yet. Then the collar cut twice, both parts lined with interfacing, and the ruffle strip, which we will gather later on. First, take the front parts and sew the darts. There you go. Second, sew the front and the back parts together at the shoulders. And I finish the edges. If you don't have an overlocker, use your zigzag stitch to finish the edges. Third, let's move on to the statement of this shirt, the collar. I'm gonna take the long strip of fabric, which is 160 centimeters long for a size 34, and I'm gonna fold it and press it down. I make a notch in the middle, I pin, and I gather it. Once it's gathered, I pin it all around the collar. You'll have to do it as evenly as possible, which might take you a while. Then you want to pin from one end to the other. There is no seam allowance to respect here. Once you've scraped the bottom of your barrels looking for every single pin available in your house, this is what you get, and that means you're ready. You're ready to sew that motherfucking ruffle strip to the collar, and you sew in the seam allowance. Okay, I remove the pins. Now I pin the other side of the collar, and let's sew all layers together, while this time respecting the 1cm seam allowance. I am trimming the seam allowances. I turn upside down, and now I see that one side looks more pleasant than the other. Should you have wanted to correct it? Well, you should have done it before, Isa, okay? Because now it's time to move on to sewing the collar to the neckline. I have pinned the collar on the right side of the shirt, and I sew, respecting the 1cm seam allowance. Done. Now I'm gonna add the bias. Okay, let's pin this bias. Several things. You want to sew the bias 1cm from the edge of the fabric. Therefore, we want to stitch on the same seam that we did earlier. Second, you want the ends of your bias tape to stick out by something like 2 centimeters after the ruffles end. That way the end of the bias is in the bottom placket. So I have inserted these first pins to make sure I place the bias exactly on the seam line, and then I'm going to take other pins and this time use them to hold the bias in this position. I remove the first set of pins, and I'm going to sew all around the neckline, 1 centimeter from the edge, in the fold of the bias tape. This is what we get. I am trimming the seam allowances. As I said, you can totally take wider tape, like 1 centimeter wide, because anyway the seam is going to be hidden under the collar. I pin the little bias strip. And then I'm going to sew the tape starting the seam here, just below the tip of the ruffles. Do not go beyond, or else that seam will be visible and not hidden by the collar. And you sew all around. Let's move on to the button placket. I'm going to fold the fabric where the buttons will be. Here I'm folding this small bit, 1, and then 2, and then 3 times. I saw that you could do it that way, but I also saw that you could just fold twice, like so. 1, 2. So I suggest you just do the simpler way. Now, let's concentrate on the highest part of the button placket where the bias tape is. I am folding back the button placket. I pin. And I'll sew this bit 1 centimeter from the edge. You have to be careful not to sew the bias tape with. Okay, so this is what you get. I'll turn the fabric upside down. You can trim the seam allowance in the corner if you like. And I sew the button placket from top to bottom, both of them. And this is what you should have. Let's move on to the sleeves. Take the sleeves and gather them. Now pin them on the shirt right sides together, respecting the front and back notches, and sew. I'm going to finish the edges with my overlocker. There you go. Flatten the seam allowances towards the shoulders and top stitch. Let us now sew the sides and finish the edges. Then let's add the cuffs to the sleeves. I gather the sleeve ends. Here are the cuffs that I've already ironed, so they bear a deep fold. Fold again right sides together and sew. I've pressed the seam allowance open as well. I'm going to pin the cuffs to the ends of my sleeves. Notice that I'm pinning the right side of the cuffs to the wrong side of the fabric. Take your time to evenly spread the gathering and sew. Once it's done, I remove the pins and now I do something off frame. Good job, Isa, which is that I draw my seam allowance. I drew a line 1 centimeter from the edge with a pencil. I fold my fabric on that line and I press down. I turn my shirt upside down, so we work on the right side of the fabric, and I pin the cuffs so that the edges barely cover up the seam I did earlier, and I top stitch all around. This is what we get. I'm going to finish the edges with my overlocker. Hide the threads. Then you fold twice and press down and sew. And finally, let's sew the buttons and buttonholes. I trace the buttonholes on the right front part. I make the buttonholes. And after that, I add the buttons. And that's it! If you make it, don't forget to hashtag it on Instagram. And I'll see you there, hopefully, on Instagram, I mean. Meanwhile, you take care.